Hey everyone, it's Andrew Schiffman.
Harry Turcotte here. We both worked at MTV in the music and talent department in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah, it was a time where music videos, TRL, The Jersey Shore, and The Osbournes ruled the airwaves.
Yes, Andrew, those are some great years. So tune in every week as we catch up with old MTV co-workers, record label execs, VJs, and artists.
I can't wait, Perry. We'll give you insights into meeting superstars before they were superstars and some juicy secrets from that golden age of MTV.
So grab your headphones and get ready to relive the era of music television and the people who shaped a generation.
Welcome to the Music Lounge. Welcome back. Happy Friday. We have had some amazing guests over our months of taping, focusing on different areas of the industry, different areas of MTV. I think this is one of the first in the talent and casting, which I'm very excited about. I've known him my whole career at MTV. Perry, do the intro.
Thank you, Andrew. Well, today we have Vinnie Potestivo, who is formerly a member of the talent and series development team at MTV. They're responsible for the on-air hosts and creating content around both on-air talent and also music and celebrity talent. Currently, he runs his own company, VP Entertainment, and bills himself as a visibility expert. Welcome, Vinnie.
Harry, thanks for the visibility. And in the shadow of giants, you've had like people in this seat, in this guest seat, that literally shaped my career and informed how I make creative decisions. So thanks for letting me be part of the lineage. I appreciate that.
No, welcome. We thank you for taking the time, especially because you are really one of the leaders in the podcast space. So thank you for taking the time to talk to us on our podcast. We appreciate it.
Yeah, I think that independently owned content is really important, and what you can do with it when you own content is really massive. And we were there at MTV when MTV finally owned and created enough content to have ownership of, which ultimately took them from like a TV network in the States to a global pop culture brand because you own the content. So yep. I'm all leaned in on owned content. Absolutely. Owned content, earned reach. That's my jam.
Love that.
So to start, you are also very active on LinkedIn, and you shared your origin story often, how you came from Staten Island and landed a job at MTV. Can you briefly share with our audience that story and why you wanted to work at MTV? And also, was the talent and series development team your ultimate dream role, or was it just what was open to you and available? And for anyone who doesn't know, what did that team do?
Oh, wow. Shout out. Wow. By the way, shout out to Veronica, who literally gave me the opportunity of a lifetime by creating space for more people in our department to flourish, to nurture talent, and to find them. So shout out to Big V. I used to call her Little V, but like to Big V because I was always Little V. We would play on the size difference. It wasn't part of my trajectory because it didn't exist when I got into casting. I wanted to get into television. I had a VCR. I didn't have cable in the 80s. I had Nintendo, but I didn't have like MTV growing up. So if I wanted to watch MTV, I would watch it on VHS. And I got really good at mastering editing on a VCR. I would wire two VCRs together so I could edit out the commercials in between shows, and then I would have as clean of a movie as I can without the commercials in it. I swear I didn't use that skill in college to dub episodes of South Park. I swear that wasn't my side hustle. No, building websites was my side hustle in college. I wanted to work in television. Staten Island has a great cable access network, the Staten Island Community Access Network, and I clocked about 200 intern hours there from my sophomore year in high school to my senior year maybe in college. Control room PA. So I was really good at getting the tape into digital form, because that back then that was a big part of that conversion was tape to digital so we could edit at scale. And I learned how to manage content. I learned how to literally physically store, manage, manipulate, not just content at scale, but talent at scale.
Mm-hmm.
And also simultaneously in the late 90s, MTV moves to Times Square, CNN comes out, Fox News comes out. There's an opportunity on Hannity and Combs that I end up taking, where as the audience coordinator, my database is able to quickly sort through releases and data information to see who asked questions. Do we have the rights to be able to do that? Simultaneously, MTV is doing Wanna Be a VJ, giant castings at scale. And I think that first casting, Wanna Be a VJ, Jesse Camp, famously won. He was one of those people that I remember in the story, Dave Cyrilnik saying, what about that guy? Where's that information from that guy? And they were desperately, quickly seeking through all the data files. And I think that I was able to sort through that and focus on the goal and still bring humanity into a system. And luckily, as I got to MTV in 98, Spankin' New Music Week, Ananda stopped me in the street and I got to ask Whitney a question. What was it like recording with Mariah Carey on the Prince of Egypt soundtrack? I'll never forget it because Liz Patrick, the director, has me rehearse on the screen. This is, by the way, the director of SNL. Like, this is a big name drop. That's the coolest moment to think of. And Whitney says, I'm not answering that question. Give me someone else with a different question. And like my dreams were crushed there.
Wow.
And I turned to the casting director and I was like, if this is what casting is like, I have like a database of over 700 people that I could, if you ever need just people to be in the room. And he was like, well, we just got called for a very Busta Christmas special tomorrow. And I think Blink 182 is going to do like a naked bike race in the studio. And there's the show Tom Green that's coming to New York. So we might need someone like you who can organize people like that.
And you basically said, I have a Rolodex of questions and of, 200 people for casting. And that's how you got hired?
Oh my gosh. Of course, my response is 700 people. I wanted to be in the media industry so bad, and we knew nobody in the industry from our family. So there was no contact. There was no way to get in other than literally what I was told.
LinkedIn didn't exist.
LinkedIn didn't. Classmates existed, but like that wasn't getting me in. My mom told me that if I wanted to be in the entertainment industry, I'd have to meet a casting director in Times Square.
Wow.
Literally told me that. So like that's something that in the back of my mind always stuck out. So like, okay, cool. And if I want to be in the industry, then I need to go to Broadway, 45th and Broadway, and I'll meet a casting director there. At that point, by the way, in college, I'm the managing director of the Miranda Theater. So that's on 38th and 8th. So like Thursdays to Sundays, I have like performances that are going on there. I just finished filming a week on the Thomas Crown Affair, which was like a big, exciting moment for me being in casting and landing something like that. The cast bus dropped us off on 46th and Broadway, and I had to walk to 42nd and Broadway to go back to school. And that's when I saw Spankin' New Music Week, and I was like, wait, well, casting director, Times Square. Like I was told this is how I get in. And I think that I had that in the back of my mind in that moment, that it wasn't just like a missed opportunity to get to be on TV for a second on a network that I knew had a lot of impact, but I didn't quite understand the level of impact it soon would have in pop culture. So I wasn't timid or afraid of that because I didn't know what I didn't know. But what I did know was casting director was my way in. So I knew that this was my opportunity to turn around and say, hey, I'm prepared. And I don't know if you already have a database and how you're managing your releases and how you're sending out updated information on call times and casting notices and but I have a system for that because I'm a data compliancy officer at Credit Suisse First Boston on the Y2K and the launch of the Euro. Like I'm a computer programmer by trade. That was a little over creative. I talked too much for a programmer. I wanted to work on Broadway. So for the first 5 years I worked at MTV, I told people I work on Broadway.
Because I was on Broadway.
That's it. 15, that was it. I knew where MTV was because Bernadette Peters and Tom Wopat were in Annie Get Your Gun playing across the street, by the way. Like, that's why I knew where as a frame of reference. And I think that showed in some of my music taste, too. I was an early adopter to pop culture and pop music. That was a new genre of music that was hitting in the late 90s when we got there. That didn't exist. And that's when I started learning about music myself as an adult. So I was saccharine sweet on and leaned in deeply as an audience member myself for the first time finding this thing. And I watched Singled Out and Remote Control, by the way. Shout out to Remote Control. That's the show that put MTV on the map for me, was Remote Control. I love the studio. Me being at MTV has a lot to do with that studio in Times Square. That was sexy. And I knew my way around a studio. I was I knew it very, very well. And I knew when to get in the way, and I knew how to get out of the way as a big guy. So yeah, it was an opportunity. And I'll never forget Whitney being like, "No, I'm not answering that question. Give me a different question. Give me someone else." And I was like, I'm capable of asking more than one question. But that's what so much clicked in that moment. I was like, oh, like they relate this question to this person, and that's what they see. And a lot happened in that moment. A week later, I had gotten one of those like freelancer, the purple one, the purple MTV badge is like, you're a freelancer and you can work here. And I think the first big show I worked on was New Year's Eve '98, casting, working with what became audience development and helping them bring in a lot of audience at that point, where MTV was opening the gates to media to let people be involved in the process. Not yet the stars of it, which would happen after I left. You know, in '07, they would become the stars. But part of the process from '98 to '07, which were my 10 years there.
Part of your role was to book talent for MTV shows, celebrities, music artists, giving them a different spotlight. How did you decide, and what was the process on selecting musicians, celebrities for hosting roles for MTV series? Was it a show that was created around an artist, or was it a show that you were like, okay, this artist would be perfect for that? And there's been a few staples, right? Benji and Joel, Mandy Moore, and some unknowns. But what was the process like? How did you select?
Well, I gotta shout out, and this might be a spicy shout out, but to Tyrese, to be honest, who for me I think was the first celebrity host. His Coca-Cola moment put him on blast in a way in America that no celebrity had that rise of fame, and to be on a platform like MTV was a big opportunity. The answer to the question is communication. So I communicated with the powers that be. First, it was the video promo people at the labels, because that's who I was respectfully introduced to, and I didn't want to disrupt the flow of what MTV's core business was, which was supporting music talent careers. But I had this goal of needing to book artists for MTV Films. So it wasn't just casting Mario in Freedom Writers and the major films that we were doing at Paramount, but also putting part of the team that got Beyonce on Carmen, a hip opera. I was able to give artists a title and an opportunity and an experience that they hadn't yet have. Andre 3000, I'll never forget him thanking me for casting him in his first feature film ever. We took a kung fu film and we stripped the audio, and then I recast all of the audio dialogue with musicians and Snoop and Khalees. And my Rolodex was ridiculous, because the opportunities that I suddenly represented that to the core network were ancillary, but to the talent community were everything. And I kind of balanced that a bit. Also, I get to MTV in '98. There's like some data that we start working with. There's data about the Spice Girls. There's data about Britney. So like I get to MTV in '98, '99, and my goal immediately is to help MTV find the young female artist, because we saw Christina, we saw Britney, we already met Jessica. We saw that on the up and up. MTV has a wonderful relationship with Sony for years and years and years. I don't know of one network that had more impact on the MTV platform, socio-politically I'm speaking, than that network. So we had a great understanding of what their priorities were. And to be honest, be careful where you look, because you're going to find it. I loved working with Columbia and Doug and Sony and the people that were there, and Polly, and they said yes, and they made things happen, and they knew what their 6 to 9 month plan was. So I knew what they were supporting at the end of the year, in the beginning of, at the end of the summer. So I can align my goals with their goals. First, we meet Mandy Moore, and I never met a 15, 16-year-old who was just, not to say confident, but just more secure in herself, asking for help and doing all the normal things that like I just thought celebrities didn't do. Mandy was in Benji, and she was in Good Charlotte's first music video.
Really? I did not know that.
Yeah, that's, to be honest. So that, I think, to be honest, I think we were looking at Benji and Joel maybe because we knew that Matt was leaving All Things Rock, and we liked this idea of talent being hosts. But there's a big moment that I sort of, as all the '98, '99, so now we're starting to have these conversations, and there's this moment Because you're talking about, do we develop shows for talent or do we just cast talent? Most of what I did was find talent, Christina Milian, and put her in wannabes. Nick Cannon was hired to host TRL, didn't want to do that after a month of hosting TRL, came up with what became Wild 'N Out, and MTV passed. Then he came back, he invested his money and brought back. So that's him in developing a project around himself.
Yeah.
But Sujin Pak is the first talent that I can think of where a show was literally created around her. I mean, unfortunately, we were trying to be ahead of the curve, but it was called My Life Translated. And that's the first time I'm seeing us develop shows around people. And I went down to watch MTV2, a VJ on MTV2, one of his first recordings. And he had Black Eyed Peas there. And then after recording the interview that they stopped the recording. And then will.i.am goes, well, who do I need to talk to get my own show? I mean, this kid's right out of college. I have the #1 video on the network. Who do I need to talk to get a show on this network? And every eyeball in that small studio looked at me, and I was like, oh, this is my punt. This is my ball to catch, mine to drop. So I think you call Tom Calderon, you call Dave Cerulnik, you get a sign off from Lou Stellato on MTV2, and then I let my boss and everyone else, run with it. But I listened. It wasn't my idea. I listened. I was in the rooms when things were happening, and I just continued to nurture those relationships and be in those rooms. Even casting Lala, when we went through a couple of hosts on Direct Effect and DFX, I would eventually just call the programming directors at 97 and 101. I would just 105 and say, like, let's just work together. Like, we're not trying to steal your talent. We're trying to make them more famous. But it was communication, and the platform that communicated us with the best often won. We wanted to do that Ashley Simpson show with a lot of artists that we missed. And even after that, I pitched the Katy Perry show. I was told she'll never be a star. I pitched Lady Gaga. I was told I'm too Broadway. I'm too New York. I'm getting a little too artsy for our Jersey Shore family, for our Jersey Shore audience. And I'm like, I don't think so. But what we had with Ashley was the clear track. Like, we were in sync with the process of recording to execution. And there's no one person I found, because I didn't have the power. There's no one person that did anything at MTV. We were a community. No one gets the blame. No one gets the credit. That starts to get a little spicy as we start talking about more departments. Even hearing Perry talk about the name of my department, because there's music and there's talent and there's series development in it, but there's also series development. So what started off as a casting department, a utility, became a cash cow for that network, and ultimately ended up bringing in ROI in the form of talent relationships. And it's not just the shows that we created, but the space that we held for celebrities to come to us.
In your early days, which was really before social media took off, was it the first time you were approaching artists to give them this platform to showcase them outside of a music video and going on tour? And were the artists appreciative of that, or were they a bit hesitant?
Look, I was an MTV employee, so my goal was to do what my bosses told me, and I had to keep everyone happy internally.
Right.
But I also knew that I had leverage of information and assets to a community that literally develops talent internally and externally. Also, because A&R isn't just in network; it's out of network too. So I'm also now learning to work with people who are freelancers, who still have as much stake in the game but aren't employees, because in the 90s, if you're not an employee, do you really work there? And there's like this idea of what makes impact. Not every artist wanted to be famous for the sake of fame. There were many talent meetings that I had that were very serious. One that stands out is with MIA, when we start talking about documentary that might save lives versus a reality show, and what it's like to tour in America and show, what it's like being an artist here. So you find yourself in some deeply prolific, very heady, very intense conversations, because music comes from, pain, grief, love, happiness. So, sometimes it does not come from the best place, the happiest place on earth, but it comes from the best place, and then you meet talent that just, some great ideas that just didn't come to fruition. What I learned was talent doesn't get shows greenlit leadership does. It wasn't just being a celebrity, but it was being the number one celebrity in your field. We didn't just have like a teen star as the executive producer and face of Punk'd. We had the leading male in that pop culture space that represented so much more than that, and gave him an opportunity to be an executive producer when he was not, when he was an actor. When even pushing back on the host part with him was, I remember a device that they had to come up with so that he didn't look like he was a host on MTV, because that wasn't like what he was projecting. And these creative obstacles, I knew I wanted to work with creative people. What I didn't know at MTV was I'd be working with like the top 0.00001%. Like I worked with like high level creators,
Right.
where oftentimes the problems that we have are so small and minute in performance, and just with a little bit of clarity and communication at the highest level, you can see things come through. And I learned that deeply about communication, and that was my skill set. I knew what we were developing because I was casting it. And once the labels knew what I was casting, they knew what was coming down the pike. And if they can get their talent in a minute or in an hour of programming when MTV was dedicating more time outside of music videos, then that became a competitive space. But also, there wasn't one talent, one artist I ever talked to or met where like someone from talent, i.e. Lori Teague or Robin or Amino, or someone from music, i.e. Robin or Joanna or Ellie, weren't in the room. Like I was extremely respectful. And in 98, 99, my department gets created. In 2000, it goes away. And that summer of 2000, I was actually hired as a freelancer by the music department, the talent department, and the talent development department to work with the talent that would be going to Key West, because we had a lot of VJs that were starting and a lot of talent that were starting. But it was that opportunity that allowed me to sort of bridge the gap between those three vital talent departments. In a corporate setting, could have been more competitive if they wanted to play that game. But I think that the people who were in those positions truly cared about artist development and look at the talent that we launched and are still highly relevant during our tenure of time there. And that's a testament to us knowing what our brand is and how our brand can impact someone's trajectory bigger than just the episodic performance and the goal of a network.
You just touched on what I wanted to ask next was, as the person responsible for the host shows like Beach House or Spring Break or VMAs or Movie Awards, what was it like being at Spring Break or on location for Beach House? Was it fun? Was it stressful?
Yes.
Any fun
Yes,
behind the scenes stories that you can mention? And you don't have to talk about names, but you know, it's just such an iconic, these were iconic shows at MTV at that time. And I think people think that everyone just showed up and it was a big party. And I'm sure that wasn't really the case.
Well, you know, leading up to it was the not party part, you know, like the 3 weeks of production changing minds and talent dropping out and logistics falling apart and all the airline tickets took time to do things back in the day. So like it wasn't as easy as the click of a button, and we weren't allowed even back then to push the button ourselves. So you're waiting on hold, even internally. It's mayhem leading up to it. It's absolute mayhem. When you're in the office, it is literally juggling creative challenges, schedule challenges, talent challenges. It's literally micro communicating. It's making sure that everyone's aware of the growth that's changing so that no one's caught off guard. Because none of us that work with talent want to be caught in a situation where talent goes to their point person, who is usually the person we talk to, and says, what is this? What did you get me involved in? I had no clue any of this was happening. And from 99 to 2002, we were sort of like an interview network, and it was really cool to talk about music. But then Survivor comes out and Big Brother comes out, and the gamification of reality gets heightened in 2001, even as we're coming out with Osbournes, which is like, to be honest, storytelling, not like crazy audacity shenanigans, which ultimately becomes Punk'd. and needs to be our visual way of showing the grandiosity of reality. That takes time and plan. Oh man, do we have a whole can we have a whole episode on Punk'd, by the way? Just the fails. You know, my job on Punk'd season 1 was to go back to everybody that said, I will not sign a release, and try to get them to sign the releases. Like that was my
Wow.
job. That was we made some mistakes. I'm gonna say that in season 1, but we learned, and that was the thing too. Is like we did make mistakes, but we took calculated risks. And we had postmortems that were built into the process. So that being said, I loved being on set. It was a party. It was 100% a party. But if those weren't parties and we weren't excited to be there, and that wasn't the destination to be at, then I didn't do my job. And I loved it. I loved every beach house.
When you were booking these hosts, were you in that kind of coaching role?
Yeah.
As
So
well?
yes, they would call it on-camera coaching, and there would be breath work and there would be performance work. But I got to be honest, the thing I did most was not necessarily focus so much on voice and actual performance, but more so self-confidence.
I was going to say a lot of the behind the scenes.
And it's not that you don't believe in yourself, right? Like Beyoncé didn't need me to tell her to be self-confident in her audition, by the way, for Hip Hop. My job at MTV wasn't cool enough, but I wanted to be a cameraman for some reason. I felt like that was my job. So I'm in the conference room with John Townsend, Eddie Murphy, delirious and raw, like prolific director, and Beyonce, and we're auditioning for Carmen Hip Opera. And I do the MTV thing with the camera, you know. I get in there and I'm gonna give her a great reel. And I got a note, man. Oh, I was so embarrassed. I got a note in her audition, and I'm like, this is an actor's space. I should not be getting the note. And he turns to me and he's like, I don't need you to be, camera work. I can see she can act. It's fine. Like we got the acting done. I just want to see her eye contact. That's all I'm looking for. So I'm going to have her walk from one side of the room to the other. I want you to be 6 inches from her face. And I'm just going to be looking specifically only at her eyes. So all I want you to do is just get her eyes. And for years, I beat myself up on that because I was like, first off, I could take attention away from Beyonce. Like, what am I thinking? But that's what my interpretation of the universe was. What I realize now, I saw our 2 top 1% creators communicating. They had clarity in what the product was. He wanted to see more focus. She was able to understand what the product was. And he didn't have to micromanage talent to be able to get what he wanted. He was able to share and communicate in that. So holding space for that and having some success with the Osbournes and Punk'd and Newlyweds, then the thing we do next is start building space for development, because there's no good show ideas. There's just great show ideas that need to have good timing, by the way, is what it comes down to.
Timing, yeah.
To build space for that. And then we learn in my department to start having more weekly development meetings, not to see what stays in the slate, but to see what we can update and tweak, because we're a sponge in Times Square. We're not just creating pop culture. We're soaking up and spotting trends as they're being formed. So that becomes a really pivotal seat to sit in that Times Square studio. And if it weren't for my counterparts in music and in talent, I wouldn't have gotten access or the trust to the people that ultimately I ended up working with, if it wasn't for the space and grace that they gave me. And I'm lucky to say some of those women are clients now that I can give visibility to, and some of them are people I still continue to work with and collaborate with as talent bookers and executives. So it's a very fulfilling experience.
The interesting takeaway for me from that story is that Beyonce had to audition.
I mean, Beyonce was, Destiny's Child broke up. Beyonce, a female in a girl, quote unquote, girl group. And that was the reason why it worked. That's the reason why she said yes. I spoke to Matthew Knowles about it. And actually, Matthew just sent me a clip. So on my most recent episode of my podcast, I have Beyonce talking about what her father was able to do for her in the very beginning parts of her career that were really tough to see. She had everything to prove. And that's why she stepped up, created the space and time to do Carmen and Hip Opera, because Matthew, the Destiny's Child, this was going to be their 2 or 3 month trial period for their solo careers. They do their own thing and then come back as DC. And this was the strategy, was to go out, Beyonce R&B, Michelle with gospel, and Kelly with electronic. And then they were going to come back and do pop as Destiny's Child. And I saw that in play. So knowing that I could give these people opportunities to stand out in between albums, that's leadership presence. Like anyone can start a conversation, but the people who support the conversations, those are leaders. So even on LinkedIn, having a town hall on LinkedIn, a live moment where community can come together, not audience, but where community can come together, that's leadership. And you see Beyonce doing that in the very early stages of her career. They weren't afraid to pick up the phone call. And I think a lot of people believe that when you're an artist, you just have to wait to see what comes your way. But Matthew was in sales and worked in imaging in like x-rays. He sold x-ray equipment before they had Beyonce, and would become really important in the sales process for her. Also understood how important imaging was because he was such a huge proponent of imaging sales. And that's why he didn't spend any money outside of designer threads, and they were able to lean on Tina's expertise and her individuality to create custom costumes for them, keeping them relevant in between the gigs or something that would build up to the next album. That was sort of more my space. And then I knew it. And then I would back off when it was time to do Cribs or Diary or TRL performances. Or it only gets weird when like Kelly Osbourne gets invited to perform on the movie award. Then there starts to get a little bit of Cisco performs in the VMAs, and we have him hosting, a dance show on MTV. So it starts to get a little convoluted in like 03, 04, but we get through it because talent always does.
Well, I think that Beyonce should have thanked you in her Album of the Year Grammy speech. So, I mean, you made her career.
I take zero credit, zero. What a gem. What a cool moment in my career, in my experience, just to be in the room. So of course I thought it was all about me because I thought I disrupted something, but really it was an opportunity for communication.
And you were 6 inches away from her
6
eyes.
inches, right?
Yeah.
But shout out to Mandy Moore, who was the first celebrity to thank me on the public stage for winning her Best Actress. I think in 2005, she won a movie award. And that's the first time I heard my name get thanked in a thank you speech. And what made it so wonderful and so cool, I'll never forget it, was I knew all the other people she was talking about. And some of them were us, people like at MTV. I was like, oh, this is a cool, that's cool to be part of a community of people. And then when you watch these like award shows, you realize there's a couple of people whose voices and names pop up a whole lot when it comes to development.
Yeah.
And I agree with you though. I know you kind of joke around about it, but like I support people who plan on supporting me in their wins. Yeah. If in your win, it's my failure and like your victory becomes my failure, then like that's not going to be a fun vibe. And right. I've had that feeling happen already with certain shows and talent and people that I've worked on and worked with in TV that I don't really sort of care to talk too much about, but like soured my experience on certain things.
But you help shape careers, so.
I give visibility in a place where media matters, right? It's not about credentials. I was thinking about all the credentials I had back, at MTV. I can get into anywhere as long as my zone of impact allowed that credential to work. But when you get out of your zone of impact, that credential doesn't work. My VIP passes from 99 don't get me into the VMAs of 2025 the way they used to. My zone of impact has changed.
Right.
So that's where you really realize the importance of connections and relationships. And again, talent development is all about, there's going to be developing media and developing opportunities around us forever. We are creators. We create conversations. We create communities. We create audiences. We create ROI and cash flow and economic stimulus. Science is real numbers that prove that talent has, and the talent brand has impact. And if your visibility equals your viability, if like how you're seen and where you're seen equals who you impact and how you impact, then visibility matters so much. And again, shout out to you guys for taking the jump and creating this podcast and like owning it. 2005, Fat Man Scoop comes to me and says, I have a podcast. It's going to be me and my wife. We're talking about sex. He had access to Hot 97 because back then you needed to have a microphone to record clean audio. So I listened to it. And I said, this is cool, but it's like a man and a wife in like a recording studio. It seems a little sterile, to be honest. Like, let's go to your house with your cameras and like, let's shoot an episode in the kitchen and we shot an episode in the tub and an episode in the bed. And we got to it was like the three bears. This is too hot. This is too cold. This one's just right. When we got to the bed, what happened on the bed was the springs moved. It gave atmospheric texture to the conversation. I love context. over content. So I suddenly felt like I was someplace where, where serious, honest conversations happen. But we looked at that bed and knew we could take that bed and put it on comedy tours, and we can tour this around America. And we knew that bed was our way of getting out of the house and getting conversations into hard to have places, because comedy is a great way to have hard conversations. Ultimately, we were able to sell the development of the website to MTV.com, because MTV initially passed on the idea. And then we went down to 22 and got buy-in from MTV.com. And then we went back upstairs and said, look, MTV.com just bought $100,000 into our website. You can pass again, because now we have to pitch it to you again. So you can pass again, and that's fine, because then we're going to go to BET, or maybe Fuse might have been around them. There was a couple of other platforms that we can go pitch this to. We, meaning talent, by the way, not me. We being like, that's what I need talent to say, so I can create a little tension to get this over the hurdle, because sometimes you need to buy what other people can't have, and that creates an opportunity for us to have conversation. And that was the first time in 2005 that I meddled with podcasting and had success and turned it into a TV show. And now that show would be structured differently, because there would be licensing, and there would be it would be a very different structure because of how you own the intellectual property that is your podcast and what that means. So congrats on creating the space and owning it in these conversations.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
We're going to have a little quick fire round.
All right, I'm ready. Oh boy.
All right. Some of this is pretty obvious. Just don't think too hard. Who was the original host of MTV's Wild 'N Out?
I would say Nick Cannon.
There you go.
Yeah, okay.
Female artist had the lyric, "I'm missing you like candy."
Mandy Moore.
Yay.
My heart's forever yours. Love always, Mandy.
What was your first concert?
Outside of MTV, REM, Losing My Religion. Inside MTV, I got to see Beyonce. I got to see Destiny's Child open for Christina Aguilera at Jones Beach.
Nice.
And that was like the sickest concert ever.
We just interviewed Tom Calderone. I think his was REM as well.
Oh yeah. That was a big. I was in driver's ed, so I used my driver's ed time to go to Coconuts to go buy my tickets, and then because that's Coconuts was the name of the music chain back then. We didn't have Virgin in Staten Island, and then so good time. Wow. Yeah, good, cool. In the shadow of Tom Calderone, doing well.
Yeah. In 1999, Fashionably Loud, Exhibit performed "What's the Difference Between Me and You." What two other rappers performed with X?
Are they Wu-Tang?
No.
Oh, I was gonna say Red and Meth, but
Dr. Dre and Eminem.
Oh, genius!
Wow.
Oh, yes. Yeah, that was a cool performance. Yeah. That was a cool performance.
What MTV series was hosted by Exhibit?
Pimp Your Ride.
There you go.
I got to do that talent deal. That was a fun talent deal. Dude.
Yeah, that was an amazing show.
That was the coolest thing, because all of a sudden I go to LA one day and my boss is like, "Do this talent deal. We're going to do this show, and this is who the host is going to be." And I was like, "We don't have to cast and do all the things. Like, we don't have to prove that this is the best person ever. Like, this is like genius. I loved it. And what a great guy. What a great guy."
Yeah. What was the Punk'd premise with Justin Timberlake in the first episode of the show?
Tax fraud, tax evasion.
Yes, exactly.
And we made him cry, and then we had to edit it out so that it didn't look like we made him cry, but he cried like a baby.
Yeah. Justin had a visit from the repo man who claimed he owed $900,000 in back taxes.
Yeah. His mom was involved with that, by the way, too. His mom was the accomplice on that. You know what's funny? That episode I didn't know about, because that episode, the second Punk'd in that episode, is Mandy Moore. And I had such a big mouth with Mandy, and I would tell her every single thing that was happening, because there was nothing that was going to caught her off guard. No, they didn't tell me.
Amazing.
I would have been like, just make sure you look good that day. I wanted to be Talon's best friend. I wanted that so bad. I wanted to be friends with creative people who
they needed that relationship on their side too. They, what was the first album that you bought?
Oh no, I hate that. There's an answer. Simpsons Sing the Blues. It's that single, The Bartman. You can tell when I was in college, right? Like when I was in high school. Simpsons Sing the Blues, and then and then finally in 95, I get Green Day, Dookie, and like now I have money to start going
There
to
you go.
Coconuts and getting like, but
Right.
yeah, man, I wanted that part, man.
All
You
right.
could do what you
Last
did, part, man.
question. Don't know
The
if
worst answer.
it's safe for you to answer. Favorite
boy.
VJ, Jim Shear or Damien?
Oh, both of those men changed my trajectory, and I love them both. So I went through so much with Jim Shear, with 9/11, and being in that studio, and both of us starting from scratch. I went through so much with Damien from a creative perspective and from believing in myself that I could actually create content and not just cast content. Like he both of those men equally have impacted me in a tremendous
Yeah.
way. And I want to throw in Gideon Diego into that
Yeah.
mix also. I mean, those guys, like, just as much as it was my job to see them in the audience and make them feel confident and heard and seen, they really made me feel that way too.
And I feel like those VJs, and obviously Carson and whoever else, they had their own lanes and style, and they weren't competing for a TRL slot. I think Jim was happy with his lane.
Yeah.
And, you know, Damien he just fit on the MTV stage, but equally they had great careers and established themselves as great voices for the MTV and MTV2.
Thinking like, it's funny because when some of the MTV2 centric music starts getting mainstream and starts appearing in countdowns and starts appearing in the top 100, it's funny to all of a sudden we're like, well, we need Jim Shearer on TRL to introduce Snow Patrol. Who's going to introduce Snow Patrol if we don't have, you know what I mean? But he became synonymous with a certain genre of music, and that network, look, in the 90s, that network claimed what it was in the early 90s. The music industry course corrected that conversation and got them out of the we're a rock and roll only network to include a lot more and support a lot more genres of music.
Yeah.
It was hard to only have one person represent multiple genres of music, but that's why I didn't go out looking for all those people. I went out with an opportunity. I called the leaders of their industry. And I said, who's the female singers that are performing at CBGB in the next 4 months? Who should I be looking at? Who are the talent that are coming through here and on MTV News that are changing online journalism? Like, I'm looking at that, but I'm not looking for breadcrumbs and foot tracks like myself as a casting director. I'm a beacon of opportunity. So I'm showing up saying, let's work with the best of the best, and you tell me who we should be working. That's communication. And because also we were a production company and a network. Mm-hmm. People at studio and networks will never understand what it's like. We felt like a production company more than a TV network.
I think that's a skill that you and your co-workers had, to brand these no-names as voices for a global, one of the biggest global platforms on the planet. And they needed people like you behind the scenes to shape them and steer them and give them the freedom to say what they want, or you really help them establish that voice.
So it's all about branding.
That communication that you've always talked about, you know.
So we would come out, our department would create a talent brand audit of future stars, and I would no one asked for that, but we started creating that and implementing it as a leader in the voice and as a resource. And then when other platforms knew that we were creating this resource that would hit all of the MTV networks, and then I started getting feisty and I was like, why are we just let's go to Nickelodeon. We couldn't hire some people because they were, quote unquote, too young for the MTV audience, and they were able to go over to Nickelodeon, and we're able to help grow and nurture that talent thing. So for me, it was all about branding and giving visibility to the brands. Nice. Whether you're creating reports to demonstrate your expertise, or analytics to help you understand what's in between the numbers. But that gives visibility to leadership.
Right. You know, we talked earlier about episodes like the Osbournes coming out of cribs, and, pre-social media, talent hadn't really been in front of the camera the way that we wanted to portray them. Any kind of stories about approaching artists or any pushback that artists didn't want to be in front of the camera in this way?
Yeah, there were a lot of talent that were confused about what it was, because there was
Okay.
some confusion around, is it scripted, is it controlled, who really gets say in the final edit.
Not just for Cribs, but in general, just our reality bucket, the
Well, we were
unscripted world.
creating so much content
Yeah.
that we even duplicated original series. Like I remember in '05, I think there was like literally 2 reality shows on 2 different islands in Hawaii about kids that were surfing on the, like, just 2 different groups, but we started to get siloed, and in a competitive network environment, we started to look at where the dollars were coming from. We started to get siloed. The people who needed coaching didn't work out. Before we did Run's House, I did a show with Foxy. It was called Foxy's Family, with Foxy Brown. And that was a tough show. She was dating 50. Her and 50 would show up to, the studio whenever they wanted, asking to be on TRL, like thinking they had access just because they were, filming a show, or the VJs would get really close to the talent as the talent were coming up and emerging. And so talent knew they wanted to have like contacts at the network. And then you have instances of like Kanye West calling up to to our office, asking to meet with us, saying that he has a talent interview. So like we called them talent interviews. I would ask them, where do you listen to music? What do you like about it? I just wanted to know that you had opinions predicated on facts, and where did you get those facts from? That's really what I was looking for. I did a whole Newlywed series with Nas and Khalees that got the can a month before we went to air. So they
Wow.
canceled that right before me and Mr. Jones. Oh, such a good open too. Oh, I love that. But Nas was awesome. Nas was like, yo, I am not re-walking into this room 4 times. So either have enough cameras to capture me walking in the room, because I'm going to walk in the room. But like, I'm Nas. Don't make me walk in and out of the room. That makes me look like weird in front of the people. And I agree, by the way.
Yeah.
And I would go and I would say, look, if you want him to be him, you can't ask him to do something he wouldn't normally do. So like, he's not going to take directions from somebody on stage when he's performing. Why is he going to let you tell him how to walk into a room? He sees real people. It's not about the product. It's about the experience. And I think
What was
that
the
was
story
something that,
behind it not making air?
let's just say an executive shift happened
Oh,
in 2000. It came down to 2 series. We were either going to bring back a series that had already done well and we were advancing it to another phase in storytelling, or we were going to start something brand new with Nas and Khalees. And ultimately they went with The Hills. So it went like The Hills, Laguna Beach, in the city. So like that franchise came back into that place. But also like, 98 to 07, I gave the celebrities cameras. Like that was my job. It was like we had cameras on kids and celebrities in that studio. Our department gave the cameras to the artist to create the talent. After I leave in 07, what happens is they give the video to the kids. So it's no longer about, let's get you in the room and we're going to create a space for artists and kids. Let's just give you the cameras, kids, and like let you Jersey Shore and Laguna Beach and social media and look at the empowerment of how they were able to, and I look at that transition. I'm actually really proud to have been at MTV and that the 10 years that changed media, because to be honest, it was in those 10 years that we created a selfie with Paris Hilton, that we created documenting our life, for better or for worse. Osbournes, Newlyweds, and I can go on and on and on.
Absolutely.
So
so
it's
what
pretty
what
cool to
is the
think of
story
that.
behind Newlyweds? How did that show come about?
I don't know how I don't think there's any one path, to be really honest, for any specific show, but I do know that we had met Jessica when we were looking for talent in in 98, 99, in that Mandy Moore pass. That's how I first met Ashley Simpson, who actually was a little bit stronger at reading off of a cue card than Jessica. Jessica was good at being herself. Ashley was good at taking directions and the minutia of being on camera versus what Jessica could do on stage. So as Newlyweds and these shows are developing and Joe Simpson is in the studio and he's talking to my bosses and the powers that be about opportunities, he knows that, like, by the way, look at Friends, look at so many iconic TV shows. It starts on a wedding day. So like, what better way to launch a reality show than on a wedding day. And that's like literally, if you look at TV development 101, oftentimes it's either left at the altar, I just got married, or it's I got married and here's a flashback to my life. And then we move forward. So it just seemed like a really cool opportunity. And I know it wasn't easy making it. I know it was expensive in season 1 making it, because we used to like record things and then figure out what to do with it, versus season 2 when we're like, well, if you're going to a birthday party, you have to get a cake, right? So like that'll be a segment, and you have to get a gift, right? So like, and then it starts becoming a little bit more predicted reality as opposed to scripted reality. The only scripted reality show I worked on at MTV where the cast literally sat down and read a script, Run's House, where the comedy had to be controlled because it was a half-hour comedy. It was like a reality Cosby's. It was like Cosby's is a comedy show more than anything about a family. It's a comedy show. Hard conversations wrapped up in comedy, which is also Wild 'N Out. And I think the powers that be, first of all, Wild 'N Out as a comedy show, because they were like, well, we there's other networks that have open mics, so how is this different? It's like, this is not about comedy. This is about saying shit that for me in my department, this was one phrase that will come up a lot. What conversations are we starting by creating this series? Like, what conversations are we starting? So with Jessica Simpson, with Newlyweds, I'd like to think the conversation was about gender norms. She did not do what she was expected to do in the kitchen. And by the way, that's like the whole story of her career. She wasn't thin enough to do this. She wasn't little enough to do. She sang like someone who didn't look like her. She danced like someone, everything about her was, people just love to like not like her for some reason, but she's so freaking talented. And look at how she was able to tap into that talent with her brand. And the brand, by the way, is being a strong woman in a space where back then a lot of people told you who to be. She was able to come through that on her own with her own experiences. So I knew that we would use shows to finance tape, and that we would then cut down those ideas. So like, for example, we took the Real World and we took the Road Rules Real World season and then cut down all the most like audacious, well, we didn't do this, but Buna Murray cut down all the most like loud, audacious parts of that series. And that ultimately became a show about women being in a highly competitive space that were willing to do anything to win. And he sold that to Oxygen, which became Bad Girls Club. Like, look at Jackass and Johnny and Steve-O and Chris and all
Viva
the
La Bam and
all the different spin-offs that we started doing. And if you look at my casting, you want to call me out on casting, I start working with Nick Cannon. Nick Cannon is dating Christina Milian. Christina Milian is a movie star and a singer, and she writes music. She wrote Jennifer. She went on to write Justin Bieber's first single too. Like, she a really fascinating woman. I would love to get to work with her. Mandy Moore starts dating Wilmer Valderrama. I'd love to work with Will and see what ideas he has. So we start chatting, and first we book him on a pilot, but he's got an idea called Yo Mama. And to be honest, I said, I don't know, Will, I think that's not funny. Because like, I was picked on as a kid. So like, I'm not the person to support you on this idea. Danny Villa knocked it out of the park and got that show on air. I got to go see Will at work. Will and Ashton were the ones that said, oh, we played pranks and jokes on each other. Come in for a pitch meeting. Let's have a conversation. There's definitely a through line to who got in those seats. And a lot of it was based on how they were showing up in Community. I didn't look for people who had the biggest audience. I looked for people who were part of the biggest community. And I think that's why people like Mandy Moore are more relevant now than back then, because back then audience mattered more than community. Beyonce, Lady Gaga. I can think of more prolific artists that do things that centralize audiences than just decentralized communities. And I didn't know that was something that was part of the DNA and ether of what I was the it factor of what I was looking for. But I look for people who would bring up literally would bring up my name in a room that I wasn't in. When I had to cast the host of the challenge, ultimately there was Johnny Mosley. First, it was cast members, then it was Johnny Mosley, then Dave Mirra, God rest his soul, and ultimately it became TJ Lavin. TJ, as a BMXer, talked to me as an athlete in a way that, as a gay man, I was so impressed with, and how he showed up for me as a gay man in conversations with our friends that I wasn't a part of. And I was like, yo, this guy is like, this is an adversary. This is an ally. This is like, I'm gonna fight tooth and nail for this guy to get the host spot. And by the way, it was Carrie Hart was up for the gig back then. Pink was was in the picture. So Carrie Hart, that would have been a really easy thing to make happen. And there are a couple of other artists that were really big because X Games was a brand new sport. So I wanted to find the new star of the new sport, because then, so like, for example, if I was at MTV now, I'd be all about pickleball. Who's the big pickleball? Who's the Gen Z pickleball expert? But bake in now, because 20 years from now, you will not be mad that you invested in time to do the Gen Z pickleball contest, because
right.
Because loops and circles, man. Their whole careers are loops and circles.
You leave MTV, you start casting reality shows for other networks. How did that all lead to where you are right now? And what inspires you every day to do what you do?
These conversations inspire me. The alchemy of conversation and the impact that one single person can have by trusting in the thing that makes them unique. For me, I think some of that's passion and power. I'm a very emotionally in touch creative, but I also am deeply predicated on the data. So to build a space, the data part, to have the emotions, the emotional part, the passion part is a big part of what I do. I did it at MTV in the 90s and 2000s because we were gatekeepers in media. You had to pass through 1515 Broadway. I mean, like, artists sold shows to TV because they wanted to be executive producers, because they wanted to own production companies. So like, you have to be a gatekeeper if you want to work with those types of people. What changed, though, was more networks started doing reality TV. What I became synonymous with is less of the competition series, more of the series around specifically female-owned businesses, or media created around female-owned businesses for the female audience. So Bravo and A&E and Lifetime and Oxygen become like a supernatural place for me to go. But when I look at what I'm casting business owners who do business owners who are single, business owners who have 6 girlfriends that live in northern, New Jersey. I'm looking for people who have autonomy in their life. They have created the space to control who they serve and who serves them. What changed my life in 2017, I sold a show to A&E called Save It or Sell It, where 2 business owners come in and we figure out if you want to keep your business or sell it to someone else, should we flip it or flop it, sort of situation. And in that casting process of meeting business development executives and having this interview with them, not a casting, but an interview with them, I realized like how innately good I was at creating a business around the brand of talent. And if I can embed that with leadership on a platform like LinkedIn, you want to be a pop culture leader in 2000, you had to be on MTV. If you want to be a leader in the digital space right now, your zone of impact needs to be so narrowed in that only that platform that resonates with you will see you. And LinkedIn speaks to Google and ChatGPT and Bing in a way differently than any other platform. So I'd rather spend all my time and energy on LinkedIn, creating space for us to be better communicators, to better understand the creative process, also like get distribution. Like I'm not just helping people create better content. You don't need more episodes to get visibility. You need more distribution. My podcast right now can be seen on United Airlines, on Taxi TV, on Elevator TV, on Gas TV. I'm moving 15 to 30 second segments more than the normal sell of a 30-second show to a network. And I'd rather tap into an audience that exists. So, and if you own your content, you can do that. And
Very
that's the
impressive.
circle. That's that loop right back, right? Now that we all have a phone in our pocket, which a built-in iPhone, a built-in storage management, a built-in microphone, there's AI to clean stuff up from a quality perspective. There's no reason why no one from any area on this earth can't stand into their greatness and their strength, as long as their zone of impact is reined in. And that's the secret, to be honest. And I like LinkedIn because as a creative, I stand out on LinkedIn more than on Instagram, where a lot of creatives are. And I'm just another creative on a creative platform. So I lean into the Vinnie brand, showing up as my true self there. I sell nothing ever. I will never talk about sales in any stretch of the imagination on my Instagram, because those are my friends. And on LinkedIn, I talk about how once in a while, and I talk about why all the time. When I talk about how I get customers, when I talk about why I get clients. So I'd rather have clients and more long-term support than But I'm happy to help people move through. I have a list, vpe.tv/gift. I have this link that if you're looking to, you have a podcast and you want to get on IMDb. If you have a company and you're looking for what awards do you qualify for? Do you have a newsletter, a website? Do you have a marketing strategy? Do you have a brand name? Do you have a logo? Do you have a podcast? I can give you so many examples of things that categorically will help you win awards so you can become an award-winning brand. It's not just about, because I think that also signals that you're not just capable of creating content, but creating recognizable content.
Right.
It's recognizable content that helps you become a leader. Being seen doesn't help you being a leader. Being known helps you be a leader. So that matters. That impact matters, and I can help people do that now.
For this podcast, we want to get us to a place where people recognize the name and the brand and us versus just tuning in because they're a fan of Vinnie and they want to listen to Vinnie. We want them coming back every time, and it's almost like it doesn't matter who the guests are.
Smart caveat to call out, because a lot of people spend time focusing on the quality of guest or even the quality of newness. New episode.
Yeah.
That's going to help you grow, but growth and leadership visibility are not the same. They can happen concurrently, and they do when you support conversations in the middle. So if this comes out weekly and you have your tentpole day that this comes out, if you had a LinkedIn newsletter or a newsletter that supports what was just heard this week and teases to what's going to be talked about next week and supports the conversation, that will grow more on LinkedIn than a newsletter that's predicated on newness or guests, because I completely agree with you. That's where people forget that they're the source, and they're treating this podcast as the source. No, the podcast is a resource. You are the source, and I think your point of view into it is brilliant. I think that's why you're getting so many solid guests, and I've loved listening to it, because this is like I'm like walking the halls of 1515. So, which really I did well, by the way.
It has been for us. I mean, it has been incredible just reconnecting with so many people. I still am in touch with some of them, and some of them I hadn't talked to since I probably left the building, but I always had a great relationship with those people, and it's so nice to reconnect with them through this opportunity.
Oh yeah. Well, also you're now experiencing what I experienced at MTV in the 90s, which is like, how can you talk to such big people out of nowhere? People love talking about themselves. So thank you for the space.
Yeah. We have some good guests coming up too.
But they do. It's hard. It's hard being us. Mama Cass, make your own kind of music, sing your own special song. Don't let one song, one track, one artist deter you from stepping up. So there's not too many podcasts that are out there. Everyone has a reality show. What do you mean? No, not enough people have podcasts yet.
Right.
So there ain't nothing to be afraid of. And what makes the space bigger is us, because we own the content that is literally creating this industry. So we are part of the growth of this industry. And that's exponential, and we can impact that. And I don't know what's coming next, right? I can't predict the future, but I know we can make it, and I'm intentional with that. I'm meaningful.
Last and final question. What is your favorite past or current New York City venue?
Oh, yeah.
And can you tell us about possibly the best show that you saw at that venue?
I'm sorry, but I got to say this. There are some super intimate performances, like 1-on-3, 1-on-1, especially in the music lounge, by the way. Does James Blunt sing, "You're beautiful"?
He does.
Yeah.
Do you remember? Were you there when he sang in that room? And everyone is hysterical crying. And there's like this awkward silence after him singing this beautiful song. And he cuts the silence with, "I didn't even know her." Like, it was just like this like moment of levity. To answer the question, my favorite music venues are the ones that I still go to now. And when I'm sitting in my seat up in the rafters, I'm saying to myself, oh, well, I know that the talent tunnel goes from here to here. I know the backstage of the Roseland Ballroom. I got Radio City on lockdown, MSG on lockdown, Lincoln Center on lockdown. I walk into those rooms now to see shows. They are not the traditional CBGB and some of like the iconic places that I would love. That's probably my answer. But now I would say it's the big ones that we all still go to that survived the downsizing of the entertainment economy, that still have the nuts and the bones to the bare bone. I'm like literally in my mind, I'm like, oh, 10 minutes out. They're way back there. I know that tunnel takes like 2 minutes to get through, and I'm in my mind. So I would say some of those big ones. Roseland Ballroom was a big one for us. We did a lot of shooting in there. And I saw Alanis Morissette walk off the stage there, and I'll never forget being like, oh, I know where she is right now because I know what that dressing room looks like.
I love that you started your answers with the Music Lounge.
Oh my gosh.
No one's called out the Music Lounge as a venue. I love it.
Because you know why? Because all those places that I just mentioned, I had access to. The Music Lounge, I did not have access to the Music Lounge. This was a premium place for the music and talent. This was as closely as I worked with them, the music department still, and they had to do this with sharp elbows, continue to create space for music and preserve space for music. Even when we were there, they got that major facelift to but
not everyone's key card worked.
No, I asked. I wrote a whole thing and I was denied. And it wasn't even like, if we give it to you, we have to give it to everybody else. No, it was like, no.
It was intimidating to, I was in the music team. So, I was in programming. So when I went to the music and talent team, that was my conference room basically. But before that, it was very, very intimidating to.
You knew it was going to be special. You knew whatever you're going to get a promotion, you're going to get fired, or you're going to meet a new art. Something's going to happen.
Something big's going to happen. Yeah.
When I first started at MTV.com and we were doing all the music stuff, we were on 29, and then we went down to 770 Broadway. Then we came back to the 8th floor. And I would say for probably the good 3 or 4 years when I started, I did not have access to the room. And it was only when they thought, oh, yeah,
I needed bodies to go in there.
Digital's also doing a ton of stuff with music, and we should include them in the stuff that we're doing for the channel. So, yeah. So
when you would get pulled in because they wanted the room to be full for for a talent.
Oh yeah.
Performance.
No, see, I think in fact the response was, no, Vinny, you're not going to get access to the Music Lounge, but we'll invite you to the pizzas and programming meeting that we have on Wednesdays. And I was like, all right, that sounds like that's a fair trade. That's a fair trade. I'll take it.
Yeah, I do remember standing outside of the room waiting for someone else to come and tap their
and let you in.
To get in. So, thank you, Vinny, for taking the time to speak with us.
Oh my gosh,
we really appreciate it.
Thank you, man.
Congrats.
You have such a unique perspective on all of this, and so many people can learn from what you have to share. And thank you for taking the time to talk to us about all of that.
Yeah, it's an area we haven't tapped into yet, but I would definitely recommend checking out Vinny on socials, on LinkedIn, checking out his podcast. And really great having you today.
Thanks, buddy. And appreciate this because, our industry started with a shakeup. Think of all the shakeups we went through, and it's happening again. So it's us who will continue to support each other. And I'm happy to do it. And I have an open door, the same way I have an open door policy at MTV, but you had to be in 1515 to get to the studio or wherever I was. LinkedIn is a great place to connect with me, ask questions, and connect. So thank you for this.
Great.
Well, thank you. Have a good rest of your day.
All right. We'll talk to you soon.
See you guys.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for joining us today in the Music Lounge.
And tune in next week to hear more stories about your favorite era of MTV.